Welcome to the Big Book Study podcast for anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. We are a step study which meets each week on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find our website at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. I'm Kathleen from Colorado, and tonight we have with us Nicole from Texas, Heather from Saskatchewan, Canada, Dave from Idaho, and Tina from Idaho. And this is part 2 of the 12th step. And we will be reading from answers to questions that can be found in the Big Book. And we'll start with a question and then give the answer and make comments on those questions. This comes from our study guide. So I'm going to start with the first question. For thousands of recovered addicts, what has practical experience shown will actually guarantee or ensure immunity from a relapse? And the answer is on page 89. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. And I'll make a comment here. Basically, when it comes to ensuring that we don't have a relapse, it's working with others that suffer in the way that we do, others that are willing and are ready for instruction. And all we have to do is try. That's what's asked of us. But this is the thing that will keep us from relapse. And it's absolutely true for me. Living in 10, 11, and 12 is absolutely necessary. And the 12th step, working with others, is absolutely necessary and will ensure that I stay connected to my higher power. It's the most reliable way to stay connected. And that connection is what keeps us spiritually fit. And when we're spiritually fit, we can handle life because life will have its challenges. And when we're spiritually fit, we can go anywhere that we need to as long as we're being helpful and useful, and there's a good reason to be there. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Dave from Idaho. In the Big Book, the guiding principle that is associated with our solution is that giving rather than getting should be the principle we'll follow. And there is no better action of giving than the action of carrying the message to other addicts. And part of the reason for that is we are uniquely qualified to do that. We're uniquely qualified in two ways. Number one, we have the experience of what it's like to be hopelessly addicted, wanting desperately to stop and quit. Absolutely at our bottom, not knowing where else to go, what to turn to. So we have that experience, and that experience can connect us with these other addicts who are trying to seek a solution. And then the other thing that we have that not everyone has is the experience of working these steps ourselves. So we bring two big advantages right to the table. And when we combine those, our experience with the hopelessness of addiction and our experience of working the steps, together with our connection with somebody who's seeking help, this is where they say nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with those people. And So we can even just turn our thinking, if we're alone and we're not on the phone or together with another addict, we can even turn our thinking to how we can do that, carry the message, and be helpful and useful. It works when other things fail. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Dave. This is Nicole, and just wanted to say that, when we first start the process, when we first get through the 12 steps, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. First of all, we're not sure we can even help, or we're pretty certain we can't, because we've just gotten off this runaway train, and our brain is still a runaway train, right? And it's starting to slow. We're starting to, some light and some awareness of our behaviors is starting to come in. But the first thing that we know from what they say here is that there were 100 men and women who had this hopeless state of mind and body and this spiritual malady. And it was their experience that when they turned to helping other alcoholics or other people who have the same malady as us, that was the thing that helped it turn more than anything else. So we know that was their experience. And who knows why it works, but it absolutely seems to work that in all these, we're practicing these principles in all our affairs. So we're turning to be helpful and useful wherever opportunities present, and we seek out the opportunities. But, there's this wonderful circle that starts to happen when we start to help others. At least this is how I've experienced it. um, there's a circle of sort of the things that are starting to come into my awareness around my defects of character start showing up when I start to help others, and I have a little bit of objectivity, because it's not in my immediate, where the stakes are really high in my life immediately. And so I'm able to spot them and then practice a new ideal and turn back to be helpful, and then my character defect pops up again. So it's this wonderful circle of helping others and starting to, this process of clearing away, asking God to remove what blocks us from being helpful. And this is where that seems to show up for me the most. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Nicole. This is Heather. I just want to add to that, why do we, or what is a threat for us to relapse? And we know from the book that we have to stay, as was mentioned, in fit spiritual condition. Because if we don't, then we start thinking about ourselves, and that's where our problem lies. We have a thinking problem. And if we don't stay spiritually fit and follow the instructions of the book, then we just go right back into thinking about ourselves, our problems, other people, etc. So this instruction is what gets us out of our head, out of ourselves, out of our selfishness, and into helping others, being of service. And that's how we maintain that spiritual connection. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. So I'm going to read the next question. What is an experience you must not miss? And the answer is on page 89. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up around you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We belong to this fellowship of humankind because we decide to take the actions to belong. And with that, I'll pass.
This is Heather. I'll comment. I think really it is one of the biggest advantages and gifts of this program is to have the fellowship, to be able to help others, to have a group of people that know you in your most authentic, heartfelt way, because there is no artifice in this fellowship. Everybody is aware of what it's like to be you and can relate to you. And there's no need for image or image management. We all come together around the same problem, but we stay here and live in the solution. And as we watch other people, if we sponsor and help other people through the program, that is really a tremendous gift. It is the opportunity to see higher power in action in other people's lives, not just your own. And it's very rewarding and fulfilling. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. This is Nicole. I just wanted to offer a quick comment on this last thing that was read. We belong to this fellowship of humankind because we decide to take the actions to belong. So this, goes back to the life that we've been living, just moment to moment, trying to get something on the outside to make us feel better on the inside. And, uh, we will walk into a room and try to assess or be on the telephone or whatever and try to assess what we think everyone is thinking about us. And usually it's, probably something bad. Sometimes we think we're all that, but often we think all of our old ideas about ourselves come up, right? We don't belong, we don't matter, they don't like us, whatever it is. And so here is that turn that we start to practice, that we belong because we say we belong and we show up to contribute, to offer, to give, to see how we can be helpful and useful. So that was all I wanted to share. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Nicole. This is Tina in Idaho. I would also like to add a comment to this about, we previously, before hitting our bottom, and really what led us to hit our bottom, is that we believed that our belonging was in somebody else's hands. It was up to someone else for us to belong. People needed to include us, or they needed to somehow make us feel wanted or needed or whatever. But we get to our bottom around that way of living, that looking to get all the time. And we realize that we're now going to walk through our self-consciousness, walk through our doubt, and we are going to choose to belong. And the fellowship is where we first begin to practice that. And we maybe show up for a meeting and we read the foundation review, or we offer to read. We have this new experience with what it means to contribute, to give. And it just starts growing from there. Then when we start working with others, start sponsoring others, we are giving as well. And we learn this new way of belonging, which is not, again, as was mentioned, managing image. It's also not, pretending or, necessarily people pleasing or anything like that. It is showing up, it's being real. And the sponsorship relationship is about being helpful. It's not about, are they going to like what I say? It's like, is what I'm going to say helpful? Same thing at a meeting. It's no longer about, are people going to like what I say? It's about, is what I'm about to say helpful? We seek to be helpful now. And it's a belonging around an entirely new thing than we've ever experienced before. And we are active creators of it. There's a line in the book that says that we are intelligent agents of God's ever expanding creation. We are the creators. We are creating this with our higher power through this new way of living, which is giving to give. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, everyone. So let's go on to the next question. How do we determine if a suffering addict is worth our attention? And this is on page 90. And the answer is, let his family or a friend ask him if he wants to quit for good and if he would go to any extreme to do so. If he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. And so this is a very clear instruction about when to approach a suffering addict. In our before recovery, we thought that we, first of all, knew what other people should be doing. And we had all these ideas about what we wanted them to do. And if they, particularly if they were an addict of some kind, we had spent much of our time obsessing about how to get them better. Nothing worked at all, because for all of us, addicts and codependents, all of us, we have to get miserable enough. Pain is the great persuader. So, us swooping in with great ideas about how to help and when to help and what they should do never works. But what does work is if somebody is suffering, and here it's referring to a family or friend, ask. We can do the same. We can ask people that are suffering, if they are, ask them if they want to, if they are ready to quit for good and for all, and if they're willing to do anything to do so. And if they say yes to that, then we know they're ready. We know that they have accumulated enough misery to listen to a solution. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Dave. We noticed that the family or friend, the instruction, this is a much better choice for that family and friend. And if that family and friend is reaching out to us, this is what we can recommend to them or suggest to them that they say to their family member or to their friend, as the case may be. It typically is not helpful for family members and friends to shame or nag or suggest quitting, those kinds of things. It's much better for them to ask this as a question. And we can see what these precise words are in the question. Are you willing to quit for good? Would you go to any extreme to do that? And then their role would be to introduce them to a person who has recovered from the same symptoms of addiction that this person is struggling with. So if it's an alcoholic, be sure to introduce them to a recovered alcoholic, drug addict, a recovered drug addict. Very important that they share the same symptoms of the problem. And as Kathleen already mentioned, as a sponsor or a person who's trying to help, we can repeat this question. I distinctly remember the person giving me instructions repeating this question as we ended our talk about step one. They didn't say, something like, so, do you think that you're an alcoholic or anything like that? What they said is, are you willing to quit for good and for all? And then they actually had me write a commitment to myself in my book. I, Dave, am willing to quit for good and for all and to go to any lengths for a spiritual experience. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. This is Tina in Idaho. So I think it's important to see here that that after they ask, let the family or friend ask him if he wants to quit for good and for all, and he's willing to go to any extreme to do so. And then we're done. We've suggested it, and then we're done. So, and then if he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. It doesn't say then you should take him to a meeting. It says then you should introduce him to a person who's recovered. And Dave just mentioned from the same problem that this person is suffering with. And so, the family or friend might be a codependent, right? And they might not have accumulated enough pain and misery to want help for their codependency. So we don't try to manage anybody in this scenario. We just simply offer and we let it drop. And we move on to the next potential person that might need help and be ready. Because one of the things the big book tells us is that our drink is our misery is the great persuader. We don't persuade anybody. We don't get anybody ready. The disease and the pain get people ready. We just offer to help. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. This is Nicole. I just wanted to piggyback onto what Tina just said, that if we are doing any more than this, if we're trying to convince or persuade, explain, defend, then we are in our self-seeking. So this is really, there's no one that can make this decision for us. And there's no one that's going to convince us, like was just said. And this goes back to kind of what's been talked about before, why working with other alcoholics has so much benefit and contributes so much to our recovery, because our self-seeking is going to show up when we first, still keep trying to help others. And I'll pass.
Great. Thanks, everybody. The next question: in carrying the message to the suffering addict, should we omit the fact that we have recovered? Wouldn't this be promoting ourselves? And the answer is on page 90. His attention should be drawn. His attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. So we absolutely connect with one another around the problem, because if it's, if we're working with somebody that suffers the way that we do, unlike anybody else, our story of the problem is going to help. They will feel like, wow, somebody gets it. Because people that don't have addiction problems don't get it, because it's different, for them. But other addicts understand it. And so the problem is a way that we connect, but it is absolutely, they're telling us here, the answer is absolutely, we tell them we're recovered. We let them know that the solution has worked for us, and we help them to understand what recovered means. We are still breakable. We can still go back to our disease if we are not spiritually fit. That's why we, every day, one day at a time, we work to remain spiritually fit and connected with our higher power. But we are recovered. And it's the hope of that that the newcomer or the person that's, suffering sees that there is a possibility, that there is a way. And they hear that from someone that suffers the way that they do. And with that, I pass.
Thank you, Kathleen. This is Tina in Idaho. I just want to remind everybody that if you look at the title page of this big book, you'll see it says the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered, past tense, from alcoholism. That was startling to me. And as was just mentioned, incredibly hopeful when I went to my first primary purpose meeting, because the prior 20 years I'd been in recovery, but I'd never heard the word recovered. I'd only heard recovering, struggling, trying. I hadn't heard the word recovered. And when I heard it, at first I thought that whoever was saying it was bragging. She later became my sponsor. And the reason why is because it was like, okay, this person has something that in 20 years I've never heard of. What the heck is that? What the heck is this recovered thing? And and it really captured my attention. And yeah, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Tina. This is Dave. I'm going to proceed with our next question. Is it sufficient to work with a suffering addict just once a week, or once a month, or every once in a while? And the answer is found on page 97 in the big book. It says a kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day, if need be. And my comment is, I don't know about all people, but I am an addict who is, I now consider it to be lucky enough to be reminded every day, if not constantly, that I need God and that I need to turn to giving and that I need to practice these principles and that I do need to be thinking about carrying this message. I don't honestly get the luxury of a day of 24 hours to not be at least thinking and often acting from that. And that is what this instruction says. Once in a while doesn't cut it because the thoughts that precede the drink or the metaphorical first drink are pretty much constant. Constant may be an extreme word, but it's not going to take long, an hour or two in my case, for those kind of thoughts to come up, and I need the solution frequently. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. I'm Tina in Idaho, and my comment on this is that it says, if need be. And the need isn't out there, it's in here. It's inside of us, of each of us. That is where the need is determined. So, Dr. Bob, for example, worked with an alcoholic. I think he was 5,000 for the rest of his life. And many of us, we have to do it every day as well. And it's we who need to do it. We need to do it. And then it says we have to act the Good Samaritan. And that word Good Samaritan is that we're practicing this new thing of giving to give. Most of us haven't had any experience of anything other than giving to get. I'll do this and hopefully people will think I'm awesome because I've done it. Or I'll do that and I'll get this, or I'll get attention, or I'll get liked, or I'll get loved, or I'll get approval. So now we're practicing this entirely new thing, this Good Samaritan thing, which is giving for the sake of giving. It's also for the sake of staying reliably connected to our higher power. That is the action that keeps us connected to our higher power. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. This is Heather. Just my thoughts about it is, this giving to give and to, working with others really is not in my hands. It's in the hands of higher power. And if I, do the work of being open, of sharing my story, sharing my number as a sponsor, that is the initial trying part. What I have to do is part of trying to carry the message. And after that, it's up to higher power, whether or not I work with that person or whether or not I make a connection with them and contact with them and so on. I don't have a number of people that I work with. I just put myself out there, show up, give the information I can give that I'm inspired by higher power to give. And if that makes a connection with someone, great. And if not, that's fine too. I don't attach any outcome to it. I don't say I only sponsor 5 people at a time, and once I get those people through the steps, then I get more sponsees. I don't do that. I am always open to the opportunity every day of helping someone who is still suffering. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Heather. I'm Dave. I'll go on to our next question. Should we expect our work with other suffering addicts to be a convenient exercise? And the answer is a long one. It's the rest of the paragraph on page 97. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, great interference with pleasures, interruptions to your business, sharing your money and home, counseling frantic wives and relatives, innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, asylums. Your telephone may jangle at any time of day or night. Your partner may say sometimes they are neglected. A drunk may smash the furniture in your home or burn a mattress. You may have to fight with him if he's violent. Sometimes you may have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under his direction. Another time you may have to send for the police or an ambulance. Occasionally you will have to meet such conditions. So these alcoholics that were recovered are describing their experience in working with other alcoholics, particularly back in the 1930s before this book was written. That doesn't mean it's any different today. Perhaps the only difference is sometimes because of modern technology, we don't necessarily live in the same town or city as those we are carrying the message to. So the interruptions may have a little bit different nature than some of the things described here. Nonetheless, the urgency and frequency may feel quite similar. And the fact is, we are in a new way of life now. And in this new way of life, there are new priorities in our life. And the priorities are giving, helping, bringing, contributing, carrying the message, practicing the principles. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. This is Kathleen. And we are no longer the director. We have surrendered that role to our higher power. And so that includes how we help and who we help and how often we help and what that looks like in terms of where these people are. And for me, I am always available to help and always I try to help. And when I don't worry about that it's going to be too much or that it's going to inconvenience me in some way, because I leave that up to my higher power. And I trust that my higher power knows exactly how much I need to work with other suffering addicts. And I had, a lifetime of getting a lot of shit done. I'm a very productive person, but that was not always the best thing. And so my higher power has helped me with that by keeping me busy working with others. It's helped me to get perspective about my own life and to just be available to be helpful and trust that, higher power knows exactly what I need to be doing and where I need to be finding these people that I can help and how I help them. And I don't fight it. We don't fight anything anymore. I trust that I will be basically doing two things when I work with people, and one is sharing the instructions from this book, and guiding them in those instructions from the book. and sharing my experience with recovery from doing the instructions in the book. And that's all we need to do. And we don't need to be doing anything else. The way that I learned or the way that I recovered was with somebody that did that exact thing with me. And with that, I pass.
Thank you, Kathleen. This is Tina in Idaho. I just want to read a quote from page 97 about this giving to give idea. It's not the matter of giving that's in question, but when and how to give that often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, and in quotes, it says serving people, not higher power, people pleasing, approval seeking, etc., the alcoholic or the codependent commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol or codependency until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, getting our way or not, we simply do not stop metaphorical drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence upon God. So this idea of serving people, what we're getting connected to as we do this work, as we carry this message, is what would God have me do in this situation? Not what would they like me to do? What's going to please them? It's what is my higher power directing me to do? What are the instructions directing me to do? And that's giving to give instead of giving to get. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Tina. I'm Dave. Our next question asks, what is our job now? And the answer found on page 102 in the big book is, your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere that you can be helpful, or if you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. So this is Dave. I'm in Idaho. My comment is, this is in a section of the 12-step instructions in the book that makes it clear that any attempt to shield the alcoholic or the addict, to shield oneself from temptations or places that may contain temptations. That might be liquor stores or bars in the alcoholic case. It could be parties. It could be relationships in the codependence case. Shield oneself from relationships with other people. That is A, not really possible, and B, doesn't work. It doesn't work any more than shielding oneself from the actual bottle of alcohol would help an alcoholic, or shielding oneself from any kind of temptations would help for, say, gambling, overeating, sex addiction, those kinds of things. It says keep yourself on the firing line, go to the whatever spot that you need to go to, as long as your motives are good, as long as your motives are to be helpful in the purpose of going to such a place. So watch your motives. I do remember in the book it says if you are iffy with your motives, then you might want to be thinking about helping another alcoholic instead of going to the place you were thinking of. But this is basically, our purpose is now to be of service to others. And with that, I will pass.
Thanks, Dave. This is Heather. What comes up for me in this instruction is the idea that, where do I go to be of maximum helpfulness to others? And, I think for myself, a lot of it is meetings. But my purpose for going to those meetings has changed now. When I first joined CODA, I went to meetings to learn about codependency, to learn about, the traits and the characteristics and so on. But now that I have worked the steps and recovered, I still go back to those same meetings, and I go there because there are people that still suffer. And I go there to be useful and helpful. And all I need to do is share my experience, strength, and hope around working the steps, and offering my services as a sponsor to guide someone through the steps. But that's what I need to do. If I'm going to help people, I have to go where the people that are suffering are. And whether that means to a meeting I went to in the first 9 months, or whether I start a meeting of my own on Zoom or in person, that's what I see this instruction to be. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Heather. This is Nicole, and this instruction is really helpful. We read a few questions back that how do you know if this person that you're approaching is worth your time? And then we ask them if they're willing to do anything in order to recover. And now, here's this idea comes up to be of maximum helpfulness. So, worth our time isn't a reflection or a comment on the person's value or worth. When they wrote this book, the next drink that an alcoholic might take might be their last. There were people that were on their deathbeds that were told one more sip of alcohol and it could be the sanitarium or a coffin, and they still had no solution. They would go right out and get a drink as soon as they got free. So if we're spending time on someone who isn't ready for help, then we're in our self seeking, right? We want to be a good sponsor. We want to be liked. We want to be number one. We want to do a good job, perfectionism, all that stuff. And so here, maximum helpfulness is what we're looking for. If I can't be helpful here, then let me turn and be helpful here. And it's such an easy transition whenever I think of those words, because of course the self-seeking comes up with sponsorship, letting someone go and saying, I'm sorry, I don't think I can help right now. It's a hard thing to practice and it takes quite a bit of practice. But then, with that just one sentence in mind, it helps so much to transition. This is where, this is our assignment. This is our spiritual assignment to be of maximum help. And where is that channel? And I'll pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. This is Heather. We'll move on to the next question. Now that an addict has recovered as a result of taking the first 11 steps, their partner may be starving for companionship. But what must the addict spend long hours doing if they expect to stay recovered? And the answer is on page 119. You have been starving for his companionship, yet he spends long hours helping other men and their families. You feel he should now be yours. The fact is that he should work with other people to maintain his own sobriety. And my comment on this question, in Dr. Bob's Nightmare, he talks about, the 4 reasons for helping others. And he talks about one of them as being the insurance against a relapse, or what he calls a possible slip. And that this is important work for an addict to do, is to help others. And what I see here is, I see maybe some codependency upon, kind of being referred to on the part of the partner. And I think a lot of it comes down to education. What does this program really ask people to do? families need to be made aware of what the program is about, what the actions are that an addict has to take in order to become and remain recovered. And, and it's a family disease. And there are great benefits as well to partners, children, parents doing the 12-step work as well, because there is usually, the alcoholic just doesn't live isolated in an island on his own in a healthy family. The family is usually needing some recovery as well. And so I think, this question here kind of addresses that there has to be some education and maybe some recovery for families as well. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. So, what we learn about in our recovery and the book teaches us is that if we get spiritually fit, um, everything will be taken care of in our lives. So all areas of our lives will eventually fall into place if we stay spiritually fit. Every single area and will be addressed by our higher power in higher power's time, and we don't we have to work with others in order to be have that spiritual fitness. And so that is the number one priority, even over, this in this case, the relationship with the partner. And this is clearly an instruction for the partner, but it's an instruction for us as well. That if we stay with that, if we stay with helping others, then those things are going to work out. And if the partner is, really saying, well, it's my turn, uh, what a great opportunity for that partner to hit their own misery with git and with wanting attention or wanting to be number one. So that is an opportunity for that person to possibly eventually turn to the step work as well. Um, and but the number, higher power in that relationship is must be number one. And with that, I pass.
Thank you, Kathleen. We'll move on to the next one. When sharing in meetings, what should we focus on? That is, what must newcomers see in our sobriety in order to want it? On page 132. And the answer is joy or fun in our existence. And I think this, as well, we've talked about attraction rather than promotion. This is the attraction part. And I think newcomers need to see, not just that we share the same problem, we may have similar experiences, but we also share about our experience in recovery and what has recovery meant for us. And that becomes the part where we express the joy and the fun of life now, as opposed to the pain and misery before we recovered. And that is what will give newcomers the hope for themselves in working the steps if they decide to do that. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Heather. So there's a couple of things. One is that when we recover, and there's a story in Bill's story in the book, towards the beginning of the book. What happens is, Ebby comes to talk to him about being recovered, and Bill is at the end. He's hit, he has arrived at his bottom, and he sees something different. It's not just that he hears something, but he sees that he's different. He sees that he's, and I would say joy. I'm not sure they use that in that story, but that's what's being said here. And so people will see that, and they will be attracted to it. And absolutely what happens when we are recovered is that we move all these old ideas, these old attitudes, this old way of life. It goes away, and what gets revealed and becomes dominant in our lives is this new way of life, and these ideas that are really true, and they're the truth that higher power has for us. So now we are starting to see stability in our lives. We're starting to do the things that we were intended to do. We are being helpful and useful on a daily basis. And so, joy and fun, there's all kinds of room for joy and fun to come into our lives. We've been spending, like upward of 95% of our time and headspace obsessing about getting all these things that we want in life, or obsessing about our next drink, or what our partner is doing or not doing. All this obsession, it's just taken over our lives. And when we drop that to this new way of life, there's all this room for joy and fun, and it shows, and we need to show that to newcomers, is what it's saying. And with that, I pass.
Thank you, Kathleen. Dave, joy and fun is something that we sort of comes to us when there's room for it. And in the third step, it talks about, the book talks about, and the people who wrote it talk about, when we turn from our self-will or our own will to, putting ourselves to be useful to God's will, it's a bridge or an arch through which we passed to freedom. And the sense of freedom that we have from things like anxiety, fretting and, repeatedly thinking and obsessing and, waking up early in the morning, playing out all the scenarios and those kinds of things. There is a freedom that comes from that, because that is all in God's hands. It's not in my hands anymore. I know it. What I can do is give it to God, let him have it. I know that he'll take it, and that good things will come to everyone involved in whatever situation I happen to be thinking about, if I just let it be God's. And so we have this freedom, and there's much more room. When we have freedom from things like anxiety and overthinking, it leaves much more room to be present, which in my experience leads to this joy and this fun in our lives.
Thank you, Dave. This is Tina in Idaho, and my comment about this is that we are now experiencing purpose in our lives and meaning in our lives, and that is very deeply meaningful to us, and we start to enjoy our work and enjoy projects and enjoy because we are now seeking our higher power's guidance and staying in each 24 hours and doing the next indicated thing. And as has been mentioned, that anxiety, that crippling anxiety and that crippling self-obsession has dropped, and what's revealed is this, this thing again that's described in the big book as being an intelligent agent of God's ever expanding creation. And it just doesn't get any better than that. We're living our purpose, and it's just a wonderful way of living. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Tina. We'll go on to our next question. What do we absolutely insist on? And the answer is on page 132, Enjoying Life. And my comment around this is I think many addicts, I know for me, it was my experience that my default perspective of the world was despair, dread, fear, worry. And that's how, even before I got out of bed every morning, I had that feeling of dread. And working the program, I often tell people, before recovery, it was like I was in a room that was totally black and had no lights on. And as I started to work the steps and do the actions found in the program, it was like every time I did a little bit of the actions, the blinds would start to lift and a little light came in. And that was, I think, what they're talking about here is the fact that I could suddenly, have gratitude. I could now be present. I think of being in a family situation before recovery. I would be thinking, obsessing, never in the moment, never in the now. And now I'm at the point where, I can be in the now. I can actually experience things as they happen with gratitude. And as the big book tells us, we are meant to be happy, joyous, and free. That's what the Creator wants for us. And it takes, working this program and living in 10, 11, and 12 each day to get to that point. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. This is Nicole. And yeah, this, prior to recovery, the daily life was either a runaway brain, sort of just absolutely obsessive, nonstop thinking, or just wanting it to end, just really not wanting to face life on life's terms, and and uh, or anger or whatever it is, right? And coming into recovery, I had no concept of how much my resentments and my fears and my harms were like a prison of my own making. And I thought the prison was, well, I still felt like I was in a prison, but I felt like it was all outside of myself, having no idea that the freedom that I was seeking wasn't going to come from other people. The happiness I was looking for wasn't going to come from other people. It was going to come from within. So carrying around resentment, fear, and harm over a lifetime is like loading a backpack full of boulders and just walking around like that, right? So enjoying life is like this byproduct that happens. It almost happens accidentally when we take the action to walk through our resentments, to make amends, to continue to clear away what's blocking us from being helpful and useful in 10, 11, and 12. And it's like putting that, that bag of boulders just drops to the ground. And there's a freedom that comes with that. There's an enjoyment that comes from that. That almost happens accidentally. So anyway, that's all I had, and I'll pass.
Thank you, Nicole. I just want to read a quote about this that I really like from page 133. And it says, "But it is clear that we made our own misery. God didn't do it. Avoid then the deliberate manufacture of misery. If trouble comes, cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate his omnipotence." So I was making myself miserable and didn't know it. I mean, my constant thinking, analyzing, dissecting. My head was just running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, that was incredibly miserable, incredibly full of fear and anxiety. And this program teaches us a new way to live. And now, there's guidance around step 11, how, we can do our prayer and meditation in a way where when we're not sure how to handle things, we can ask for help with those things. We stay again in this 24 hours. If I'm in the past or if I'm in the future, or if I'm making up a story that I think someone else is thinking about me, I'm manufacturing misery. And probably 50% of my life, my days, my hours, my moments were me manufacturing misery. And then what it tells us about this is that this is one of those things that's so miraculous about the 12-step program, is that way of living became a way for me to be helpful to others. Other people that I came into contact with, they also had this experience of suffering and being anxious and thinking and analyzing and dissecting and making stories up about what other people were thinking about them. And so it was something that, I, when I became free of that, I could help others. It became something that I could cheerfully capitalize as an opportunity to demonstrate my higher power's omnipotence. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Tina. So we'll go on to question 26. What should we do when we see a man sinking into the mire that is addiction? The answer is in the next two sentences on page 132. The answer is, we give him first aid and place what we have at his disposal. For his sake, we do recount and almost relive the horrors of our past. So I just make a quick comment about this, that, our past is something that we have been trapped in, holding on to all of these resentments towards others, not looking at the harms that we've done and how we've been living our lives in debt. And our past is often something that we struggle with, especially if we come from families who were affected by addiction, or at whatever point we became an addict ourselves. So our past has been a horror. And many of us have used our past maybe as, we've sort of sunk down into self-pity and self-obsession around our past. Or when we do talk about our past, it's in an effort to get something like belonging or empathy or, safety, whatever it is. Our past is being recycled and reused to try to get. So here, it's not saying that we don't talk about our past, but we use it where it's going to be helpful and useful. And it is for the purpose, for his sake, it says in that sentence. So for the sake of the person that we're trying to help, if a moment comes that our past can be of service, then that's when we bring it up. And our past is our greatest asset, right? Because we identify with the problem and we found a solution that works. So we can help offer that solution and the steps and how to work them. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Nicole. This is Tina in Idaho. And I just want to offer that this statement, what we have at his disposal, we give him first aid and place what we have at his disposal. So what is it that we have now? What we have and what the big book refers to is that we have the experience of working the steps and the knowledge of the precise instructions in working the steps. This message, our 12 steps says we carry this message. That's the message that we have to carry. The experience of working the steps and the knowledge of how to work the steps. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Tina. Okay, I'll go ahead and read the next question and comment. For the addict who has recovered as a result of taking the first 11 steps, what has been given? On page 28. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works? And I'll go ahead and open it up for comment.
Thanks, Nicole. Dave in Idaho, a design for living is very much the practice of steps 10, 11, and particularly 12. And that's something new and that's something different. We have not been successful whatsoever in quitting or in stopping anything. That, in fact, is what got us here, is the wanting to quit and can't. So the attempt to quit or stop is just completely ineffective and it has no results. What the writers of the Big Book wrote is they wrote an instruction manual, a set of instructions for how to get and keep a relationship with a power greater than ourselves. Not a manual for how to quit drinking or quit anything else addictive, but a manual of instructions for how to have a relationship with a power greater than ourselves. And the way that we hold on to that relationship is through the practice of steps 10, 11, and 12. Step 10, watch for the stuff that comes up within ourselves that we've experienced all our life, that we acknowledged and inventoried in step 4 and is now coming up again. Self-seeking, dishonesty, story-making, resentment, irritation, fear, inconsideration of others, those kinds of things. As soon as we see those, we take actions that are very clear to us in step 10. There's 4 of them. We ask God for help to remove them. We talk to somebody else in program about them immediately. We make amends if we've harmed someone, and we turn our thinking and actions to someone we can help. Step 11 is more structured. What do we do in the morning? What do we do when we're agitated? What do we do in the evening before bed? And then step 12, of course, is the one that we're talking through the instructions on, carrying the message to others. Pass.
Number 28, is it okay to let a suffering addict leave a meeting without being given the opportunity to take step 1 and thus understand what it really means to be an alcoholic? Hint, the answer is in the 3 sentences beginning with, "It was the usual situation." So the statement is, it was the usual situation: home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears, and standing damaged. He had a desperate desire to stop, but saw no way out, for he had earnestly tried many avenues of escape. Painfully aware of being somehow abnormal, the man did not fully realize what it meant to be alcoholic. And so it's talking about a desperate person that we see in a meeting. And do we let them leave without giving them an opportunity to take step 1? And so what we do with someone that we see who's desperate is we take them to page 44 in the Big Book and we ask them these 2 questions. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit your behavior entirely, your drinking or your codependency, and if they say yes to that, then we say, or if once you start your drinking or your codependent behaviors, do you have little control over the amount you take? And for a codependent, we could say the amount you do or think about it. And if you do, you're probably an alcoholic, you're probably a codependent. And if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So this serves to give people hope. They were baffled by their problem. They were beaten by their problem. They're desperate by their problem. They're out of ideas. And when they come to this spot of realizing that, oh, I'm not just a horrible person. I'm not just a, rottenest. I'm not just completely worthless. I'm not just completely, you know, um, whatever. I must have a spiritual experience. I mean, a spiritual illness. What you're telling me is that I have an illness. That's the first time many of us have heard that we have a spiritual sickness which needs a spiritual solution. And that we haven't yet tried. That is where the hope is. And with that, I'll pass. Does anybody have any additional comments about that one before we move on? Okay, number 29. Searching for and helping suffering addicts is often a frustrating and heartbreaking experience. What was the founder's experience around several failures? And the answer is, after several failures to find others, a fourth turned up. And with that, I will pass.
Thanks, Tina. This is Nicole. This goes back to that, for me, that idea of self-seeking and practicing these principles in all our affairs. And it's a process. We're like learning to play chopsticks when we first start out helping people. And, we will get into, like, for an example, an idea that, we have to get this person through the 12 steps. And if we don't, because we want to be good, we want to do it right, etc. So all those kinds of self-seeking driven ideas. So when someone doesn't get to the end of their steps, then we find that we might be resentful, or we might, feel badly about ourselves. And really, that's not our job. Our job is to just show up and offer these simple directions. It's a recipe, and we have taken the steps ourselves, so we know how to do it, and we can help offer these instructions. And so our job isn't to get someone to the end of their steps. Our job is to show up and try to be helpful. And it's a heartbreaking experience because we've been there. So also on the other side, outside of the self-seeking, we've been there. We know what it is to be without hope. And it is heartbreaking when you were without a solution, and then it was offered to you and something finally worked. And all you want to do is like shout it from the rooftops, and tell everyone and be helpful. But if someone isn't ready, the worst thing we can do is to keep getting in there, trying to muck around with God's job, right? And our misery is our greatest asset. It's the thing that's going to help us to get to the point of being ready to turn our will and our lives over. So the most helpful thing we can do is step away and turn again to be helpful. And what they're saying here is you just keep trying, and the fourth will turn up, right? And I'll pass there. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicole. As is being alluded to, we really have to watch our motives in step 12 with carrying the message. We are there to be helpful to a newcomer, not to get some kind of result. The natural old message motive is I need to be successful in working with somebody else, whatever measure that would have. We're not going to know that measure, actually, really, either way. But in so many cases, if somebody doesn't stick with the program, it may well have nothing to do with us. It most often has to do with that they need more misery, that they need to find a lower bottom, that they need more desperation in order to bring the willingness to them. And that is absolutely between them and their higher power. So we can't expect that each person that we start to carry this message with will carry through. Occasionally we find a heartening success. With that, I'll pass.
This is Tina in Idaho. And I just want to point out that the verbs in the 12th step are 2, and they are the words that we try, and we practice. So that's all we're asked to do, is to simply try to carry this message and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to number 30. What should we ask in our morning meditation? And the answer is what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. And that is what I end my meditation with in the morning. Show me what I can do today for the person who still suffers. And that sets my intention right. It sets it up for, I'm in give instead of get. I'm in that acknowledgement that I'm here to be an intelligent agent of God's ever expanding creation, and that my most important work is carrying this message to people who still suffer. And with that, I'll pass. Okay, I'm going to move on to number 31. What were the co-founders' 4 reasons for spending so much of his time working with others? From page 180, it says a sense of duty. It's a pleasure, because in doing so, I'm paying the debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me, because every time I do it, I take out a little more insurance for myself against a possible slip.
Thanks, Tina. This was Dr. Bob. We know this from reading his story in the back of the book. And he, outlines 4 really good motives for carrying the message. Number 1, it's something that we can do because we have been given by our higher power that which we need in order to be able to do it. Talked about this earlier. The 2 things we really need are, number 1, our experience with the misery and the suffering of the disease of addiction, and number 2, our experience of having worked the steps ourselves. It's always a pleasure just simply being in a position to get to know somebody else as a friend and to help somebody else and try to help somebody else. Yes, we're paying it forward. We're passing on what has been given to us. And the insurance, it is simply that the step 12 is the thing that works when other things fail. It is the thing where we put the power that we get when we connect with our higher power into action and into a flow, and we then have a power that we didn't have. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Dave. My comment here is just, look at, this is just completely the opposite of us when we're in our disease, before recovery. It's just a whole different ball game. We're thinking about a sense of duty, and we're helping out, and we're concerned about our recovery and our future in recovery. We're actually paying back what has been given to us. And before recovery, we were so self-centered and so self-absorbed, and we didn't even think about what other people have done for us, much less how can I repay them. We weren't, the sense of duty wasn't even a thing. And so anyway, it's just such a stark difference between now and when we started.
Thank you, Kathleen. Moving on to 32. The co-founder sponsored 5,000 addicts in his 15 years sober. That's more than 1 a day, before he passed away from natural causes. In his experience, staying sober never fails if we go about working with others in a certain manner. What's that manner? If you go about it with 1/2 the zeal you have been in the habit of showing when you were getting another drink or getting your way, getting liked, getting loved, etc. And I just looked up the word zeal for synonyms, and they are determination, devotion, diligence, eagerness, earnestness, gusto, intensity, passion, perseverance, sincerity, urgency, drive, fierceness, fire, and initiative. Any other comments on number 32?
Thanks, Tina. This is Dave. One comment I have is in helping 5,000 addicts in 15 years, we can perhaps see that Dr. Bob, one of these co-founders, did not use the let's have lunch together once a week style of sponsorship. I think he worked the steps together with others promptly, relatively efficiently. Otherwise, that demographic simply would not have been possible. So in there, we see a model of what working the steps and sponsoring another person looked like in that time with that co-founder. And the zeal. So we all know what kind of zeal we have put into our addictive behavior. We can spout our stories about it. He says if we even give it 50% of that level of zeal to carrying the message and helping others, in his words, it will never fail. Pass.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, the last question here. What is the primary purpose each group should have? Is it making friends? Is it getting current? Is it giving feedback or advice? And the answer on page 583 or 563, I can't see. It says that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers.
Thanks, Tina. This is Dave. I believe that is tradition 5 in paraphrase. And we know that our purpose for gathering in the meetings isn't because the meetings keep us sober. Our purpose for gathering in meetings is so that the recovered people can connect with the people who are seeking help. And if we attend our meetings with that purpose, if we attend our meetings with that motive, to either seek help from a recovered addict or to bring the opportunity to carry the message to others who are asking for help, meetings carry a very useful purpose. If we're attending meetings to feel better after the meeting, to keep us sober, quote unquote, now that we've attended a meeting, etc., I will just point again to tradition 5. That is not the primary purpose. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Dave. This is Nicole. Yeah, I think, when we first maybe start going to meetings, again, going back to that idea of we might be showing up in order to get, information, to tell someone our problems, to try and get answers, to try and get someone to tell us what to do about our problems. And none of that really helps to solve our problem. It's just spending more time in our misery. So going back to what helped the alcoholics who recovered was for their primary purpose for showing up into meetings is to carry this message to show other alcoholics how we work the steps, and to pass on what was given to us. And as long as we keep to that purpose, then we're practicing step 12 and carrying this on. And I'll pass. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm just going to read the promises from page 100 from after we work all 12 steps. It says, both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances.
Thank you, Tina. So, thank you, everyone, for your comments and your service. This is our last podcast as far as studying the steps. And thank you all for joining us and for listening to our podcast. Speaking of carrying the message, that is what we do on our meetings, which are on Sundays at 2 p.m. and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Both of those are Eastern. That's what we do. We study the big book and we talk about the precise instructions. We comment on the precise instructions. So please come join us. You can find out about those meetings at our website, and that is primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. Please join us on the road of happy destiny.